Hey, hi. You coming on in?
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. It's How to Be Queer time.
Every day is How to Be Queer time. Welcome, listeners. My name is Alex. My pronouns are they, them.
And it's Kim. I'm back again. Pronouns are she, her.
I like it when you're back.
Welcome to the podcast. If you are interested, you can actually go and see us we are putting our podcast on YouTube so you can watch us do this, which again, it's really highly produced.
There is. I have to say, I've been working on a whole bunch of things lately. With all the announcements are coming, so stay tuned.
That means you have to listen to the end. But welcome. Thank you to our sponsor, Youth Scene. That is youthseen.org. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you need to go over there. You need to click that donate button. You need to send them some love. They do amazing work in our community and they support us doing this podcast, which has ended up being really fun. Hi.
We're ready to just jump in.
I think we
could do a whole bunch of marketing stuff, but we should just jump in.
I think we're jumping in this week. We have guests with us.
We do. And before I interrupt someone else with this, I have to wish everyone out there a happy International Non-Binary Peoples Day. That's today, July 14th.
Happy Non-Binary Peoples Day. You're my favorite non-binary person.
Oh, thank you.
But we have some folks sitting at the table with us.
We do. We'll let them introduce themselves. They're pretty special.
Addison Herron-Wheeler. I am co-publisher and editor-in-chief of OFM, Outfront magazine, and my pronouns are she, they.
Maggie Phillips. I am the Chief Everything Officer and co-publisher of Outfront magazine, and my pronouns are she, they as well.
Well, welcome, Addison and Maggie and Outfront magazine to our podcast. We're so excited y'all are here. And I'm going to jump in with my first question because I can hear our listeners and mom, I know my mom would have this question and she's an avid listener of this. Explain. And I feel that feels even weird, like explain. I hate that word, but I would love to know more when you say she, they. Tell me what does that mean? If somebody wants to be supportive to you, which pronoun should they use? Tell us if that's okay. Tell us more.
Yes. So for me, I think I identify both as a woman and a non-binary person kind of fluidly throughout my life. It makes sense to me because of the connection I have to feminist as well as the connection I have to sort of being beyond the binary, to quote our column written by Keegan Williams, and, just kind of fitting in with either male, female, or neither. And I'm equally okay with either she or they, just preferably not he. I get misgendered a lot over email when people just assume someone in editorial is a man. So I would prefer she or they.
Oh, we're going to jump right in with all this. Okay, Maggie, tell us she, they. And I love that chief of everything. That's an amazing way to say it. I love it.
I have to say I stole that from TikTok. Somebody with a small business had that on their chief everything officer. And I'm like, that is so true.
I love it.
Especially because we've been so short staffed since we took over. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of jobs. Well, we're both doing a lot of jobs. So, and so she, they, I actually recently came out as she, they, after a lot of, thinking about it. And yes, Keegan's article actually had something to do with that too. I have always talked about how I have felt more on the male side a lot of times in my life, even though there's also lots of female sides of me too. But I definitely feel like I'm part of a spectrum. And I love that term spectrum because it's so just trying to cut it between just male and female, just girl and boy or whatever is just, it's never made sense to me. And
yeah, spectrum's a really beautiful word.
I agree. Mm-hmm. And then when I read Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, I definitely have more of a Mars side to me, especially in relationships. So so I've always talked about that and always, joked about what a guy I am. And even in my marriage, I'm the guy in the relationship. So it's I definitely need to embrace the fact that there's so much a part of me that's non-binary. And I don't think I would be offended if I was called he. I've definitely been called sir before, but I feel more comfortable with she or they. And I really like they because that also embraces who I am. But I'm okay with both. I'm comfortable with both.
So, well, thank you both for sharing that. And you would, so chief of everything of OMF and editor in chief of OMF, Outfront magazine. When I met you two, because of the magazine, which was the reason that we met. And the magazine is, if you can tell everybody a little bit about what Outfront magazine is, and then how you two, because the history of the magazine is actually really fascinating, and how you two came into this world. Do you mind sharing that story?
Yes. So the magazine has been around since 1976.
That's the year I was born.
Ooh, the same age as the magazine. I love
am.
that for you.
I'm so
So we are, not to now make you sound old, but the second longest running LGBTQ publication in America. Second only to Philadelphia Gay News, which is technically a newspaper, and we're a magazine. So longest running magazine.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we have been in Colorado since then, originally founded by Phil Price in Boulder, and then moved to Denver. And we've been here for 46 years. Yeah.
So did you, before you guys started because you guys are the publishers and owners of OMF?
Yes.
Right. So OFM, sorry. That's right. Am I getting it confused with a band? Wasn't there like a band in the 90s that was something
Probably.
like that?
And One Main Financial, who I bank with, sometimes it's OFF. So sometimes people say it that way.
So the magazine is we're going to say it's the longest running because it's not a newspaper, it's a magazine.
Yes.
So how is it that y'all become who you are with the magazine? How did that happen?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll start. So I moved from Kansas City back to Colorado. I'm a native in Colorado. And so I was so happy to get back here into the mountains. And then the owner was Jerry Cunningham. And I was looking for a job, and I had a background in both administration and graphic design. And that was exactly what he was looking for. And I should probably ask him what it was he saw in me, but he stalked me on LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff. And so he reached out to me via email, and he asked me if I would be interested in working for a 40-year-old LGBTQ magazine. And my first reaction was, 40 year, wait, there's an LGBTQ magazine in my city? Like, what? How did I miss that? So, and then I was like, hell yeah, I would like to. So I interviewed with him first, and then I interviewed with the entire team because the entire team had to sign off on me.
How big was the team? It was,
there were 7 people there. One was missing. So the team was 8 at the time.
Okay.
And then the one who wasn't there, Christopher Liffler, who you're familiar with. His only question was, what was my zodiac sign? And we're both Leos, by the way. But he started there like 2 months before I did. Anyway, I had never wanted a job so bad in my life. And I was just like waiting by the phone, hoping. I was posting on Facebook, like, everybody cross your fingers for me. And sure enough, like, I got the job, and it felt very personal in my journey because right before I moved to Colorado, I had given up my religion. I had gotten remarried. I had decided that I was going to stop living for everybody else and being what everybody else wanted me to be. And I'm just going to cut that tie and be authentic, be myself, figure out who that is. And then, like, if people didn't like that, then they were just going to have to deal with it.
Okay. I got to ask how. I know. I think we're both like, I have so many questions. Okay. How old were you when this happened?
Well, it was 8.5 years ago. So I must have been 40. Well, 41 when I moved back. Yeah.
So, okay. So
By the way, if you're doing the math, Jerry said 40 years, but he was always like a year or two ahead when he would say how old OFM was.
he did like Kim math, right? Like it's vaguely around here. I can round up or round down. It's fine. So when you joined though, what was your position when you joined?
I was an administrative assistant and graphic design assistant. So
And
I
now
think
you're
they
the chief
called
of
it.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. So how did that walk us through that a little bit?
So I directed operations basically. So it kind of evolved from that to office manager to director of operations. And then, gosh, I think for at least the last 3 or 4 years, everybody was talking about how I'm the one that runs the show and the one that runs the magazine.
Chief of everything.
And so, which was not true. Like our whole team did it. I just tried to keep all the wheels turning and all the gears grinding. It's literally what I used to say is I'm the gear grinder. And so when Jerry decided that he wanted to sell the magazine, he had been looking for someone to take over for a while. And he finally looked at me and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And this is COVID, mind you.
Holy shit. I got to ask you this before. So when you thought of like your life, right? Did you ever think at some point, I want to be like a publishing person? I'm going to own a magazine. So this really was like, you just opened yourself up to the universe. And now somebody's saying to you, because you're the chief of everything here, do you want to own this magazine?
Yeah.
And your answer, was it immediately like, hell yeah, I do? Or was it like, oh shit, I don't know?
No, it was a hell yes. I felt like I owned it from the moment I walked in the door. That was my baby, and it has always been my baby. But I had a stipulation. I wanted a business partner. I wanted to bring in Addison as my business partner. And that was like, he was like, okay, well, I'm selling it to you, but if you want to, give her stock too, that's fine. And so I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to organize it, because I want my chief editor and most wonderful work wifey to help me with this endeavor, because I'm really great at the operations, and Addison is extremely skilled and has experienced so much in editorial, the whole editorial side of things, and was already doing a great job. So
you had been working at the magazine too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I started as associate. Well, no, I started as digital content manager, which was like a freelance part-time job to start, basically just doing the website and social media. And then I moved up to associate editor and became an employee, and then full-time. And then when the other editor moved on, I became editor. And then I moved up to both editor in chief and co-publisher when I became a part owner.
So when she came to you and was like, hey, my stipulation is that you're going to be my partner in this, what did you think?
I was very, very excited. I think excited and nervous and hopeful that it would happen. But yes, definitely on board right from the beginning.
And how long has it been now that y'all have been the co-owners and partners in this?
Since October 2020. So
a really easy time.
yeah, it's been great.
Just a breeze.
Not.
So tell me, like, when you took it over, because it is different, right? Yeah, I want to talk about that. It is different with you guys at the head of it. Give me what did you think? How has it changed for you? And what is for anybody that picks up that magazine? What do you want them? What's the mission? What do you want them to feel from it?
I think the biggest thing I want people to feel is acceptance. I know for a long time, our motto was where you belong. And I like to split hairs with that one and say, maybe it's not the space where everyone belongs. It's not the space where these problematic people belong. But at the end of the day, yes, that's what I want. I want people to feel like they belong, whether they are an ally, newly out, a person of color, a non-binary person, someone who wouldn't normally see themselves on the cover of a queer magazine. I want them to feel like, oh, there's something in here for me too. This isn't just for, attractive cis gay men. This isn't just for white people. This isn't just for affluent queers. Like, this is for everyone.
This isn't for like just the same body type over and over and over again.
Exactly.
And you can see that. You can see the changes in the last couple of years, especially that we're trying really hard to make sure that we make everyone feel accepted. And the biggest compliment we get is when someone says, I see myself in your pages. And that just really touches our hearts so much because we are trying, and it's a big spectrum to cover. So it's hard to get everyone in there, but we really do try.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's like, Alex, you and I have talked about this so many times in this podcast of like, for me, healing, right, is whenever I see myself reflected outside of my home or my own skin. And so, I think you and I are probably similar in age. I, grew up in the 70s, and I've talked about this so much on this podcast. The only like queer person I ever saw was Ellen DeGeneres. And then she was, torpedoed in life for years. It was like everybody loved her at first. And then they were like, yeah, no. And in your story with how many times did you watch Boys Don't Cry?
Yeah. Yeah. I watched it so many times. And then I remember seeing like Katie Lang.
Yeah, I liked Katie Lang. That's not going to surprise anybody, but yeah.
But yes, the messages I got specifically about transness was seeing Brandon on the movie, which was very tragic and complicated.
Well, and you, I remember you telling me that you would go over and over and over to watch the movie, almost like you were hoping for a different outcome.
It's like I was hoping for a different ending. I'm like, I knew the ending and I knew the movie. Like I was like, why do I keep going back to watch this 3 times? And then I bought a copy of the movie, and but I think I've kind of always tried to. I try to kind of live my life. I have a little bit of an obsession with pain, which is kind of weird, but maybe not. I don't know. But that I somehow this idea that if I look at the pain, it can somehow cause some healing.
No, and you and I talk about this all the time of like, you're always telling me like, Kim, you have to look at the dark to be able to see the light. And I'm like, why can't we just look at the light all the time? I don't want to look at the dark. But for you guys in trying to create that space, I think what draws me to what you do is I remember what it felt like to feel that absence of anything, because the gaps and the way that people fill in the gaps can be really dangerous and demoralizing and dehumanizing. So that's why the gaps and the lack of representation to me feel so dangerous at times. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like I feel less safe today than I did 2 years ago, than I did, the representation that's needed to show thriving queer people in all existences of queerness, which you're right, it's a really big spectrum. That's quite a challenge, but I'm happy that you guys are there doing that.
Thank you. It means a lot. It is a lot of work, but it's so worth it.
Yes, thank you. I had one Starbucks barista who one time was like, thank you for your service when I told them what I do. And at first I was like, what? And then I was like, no, that's really nice.
Yeah, that is really nice.
It is service though. It's service leadership. Yeah.
Yes.
And I definitely feel that lack of representation. I was just telling Addison on the way here that I didn't really know or understand what gay meant or was until my junior year of high school, because I stopped going to Evergreen. So by then I was living in the foothills, and Evergreen was very conservative and very racial. And when I started going to an alternative school where they had kids from all over, I was finally exposed to different walks of life, different viewpoints. And that's when I met a gay kid named Eric, and learned all of the struggles that Eric was having. And it was really difficult for me to witness that and feel that, because I cared very much about him. It's also when I was exposed to Rocky Horror Picture Show, which should have been my very first clue that I was not straight, but I know, And so
mine was the U.S. women's soccer team. I mean, but we all have our end, right?
So that should have been my first clue that I was pansexual, but they didn't have a name for that back then either. So I just called myself a freak, to the few friends over the years that I could open up to. But yeah, seriously, pretended to be straight for a long time, just like you talk about on your podcast.
Yeah, when you don't have the language or the understanding of yourself or freedom to look at yourself, how to try to fit in a heterosexual world when you were just like, I didn't have the language for what I was. And I want to come back to your language. Were you going to say something? Sorry, honey.
Oh, just that. Yeah. When I was thinking earlier about not having, like, ignoring the language, but then it was almost like, but you're digging deeper and you don't even know the language. And then once you have the language, then there's no going back. You can't ignore it anymore.
When did you get the word pansexual?
When I was at Outfront. So I'll backstory a little bit.
Yeah, share as much as you're willing. I want to hear it all.
So I came out of, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. Before I was a Jehovah's Witness, I went to the Assembly of God Church, which is just as anti-gay. But as a witness, I was always like, still kind of open-minded, like you're not supposed to live that way, but you're not supposed to judge anybody either. And so but I sure.
Oh, that's a powerful statement right there.
Isn't it?
Okay. Sorry, keep going.
And literally what started to pull me out of that religion was a friend asking me, well, what if your son comes out as gay? And I'm like, well, I would be on my son's side, of course. But that
Mom
ate at me for a long time. Why am I worshiping a God that would not accept my gay son? Ate at me for a long time. But anyway, so I had come out of the religion. And before I got together with my third husband, that's a
whole other thing.
Yeah. I was the safe place for all of the high school students to hang out and all of their gay friends. My oldest son had a best friend since grade school who was a lesbian, now considers herself pansexual or has figured that out. And so like all these queer kids are in my house all the time, and I am feeling more at home than I ever have and not recognizing why, but just loving that, they come in and they're kind of standoffish and they're kind of guarded. And then as soon as they see and feel that acceptance, they just open up and you get to know their real personalities. And it was just so beautiful and such a wonderful thing for me. And anyway, so when I walked in the doors of Outfront, I thought that I was a queer ally. And so I walk in there, just being an ally to everybody. But the more that I read things, the more that I talked to other people, the more that I talked to my coworkers, especially we had some very intimate conversations, very TMI conversations. The more I came to understand the different types of orientation and identities. And our designer at the time is pansexual, and she would talk about that, and she would talk about herself and how she came to know that. And I related more and more and more to everything she was saying. And so over time, I realized I am as queer as all of these people.
Right.
Like, I can't believe I have not. And then, therapy helped me work through all of the reasons why I didn't want to face that about myself.
Everybody uses their language differently. So when you say pansexual, what does it mean to you?
It means that I don't care what is in your underwear. I don't care how you identify. I could be attracted to anyone because I'm attracted to the person.
So how is that, if somebody was to say, well, how is that different than bisexuality? How do you define it?
Honestly, the way that the term bisexuality has evolved is almost as inclusive. Because now when I read it then, it was really just, you didn't mind if someone was male or female. And I think that's evolved since then. But I couldn't just say, yeah, it's down to that, because I have met trans people that I have been very attracted to. I'm sure I've met intersex people that I've been very attracted to, I don't care what's in your pants. Like it doesn't matter to me. And so, and I'm sorry, I have to repeat you guys, because I love when you say that. Like, why is everybody so concerned about what's in their pants? But I get, that you have like lesbians are only attracted to women. And I get that gay men are only attracted to men. But
yeah, I mean, the whole pants thing for me, because I actually had to unpack a lot of that myself and I remember talking to, this is where Dr. J really helped me, because I didn't want to be a lesbian, because quite honestly, like what do you do when you're like, okay, I could see myself saying I'm pansexual. I don't really care what's in your pants. Nobody should care what's in your pants. I care what's between your ears, but I don't know how much it matters. But then what I had to do, and this is like, Mom, this is when you pause, but I had to think about, what do I feel with certain body parts? And I have an aversion to certain body parts. And that would be, I have an aversion to penises. And that's what Dr. J helped me unpack, right? Was that, however you identify, you can identify however you want, but I have to honor where my own attraction lies. And it's okay to say, I love, be you, do you, but if I'm going to interact in a sexual way, there are different body parts that are going to feel good to me. And there's going to be ones that don't. Now, have I loved people with penises? Sure. Because what was going on between their ears, I was like, I don't care what's in your pants, right? Because it's more for me, what's in the head than it is in the pants. But I'm sure I'm not the only person that may have, I know there's other people out there that have aversion to penises. Anyway, thank you for telling the differences and how that feels for you.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying. So it's really the sexual part that makes a difference.
That's the part that makes a difference to me. Yeah. Like, again, like I don't really care what's in your pants, but if you want me to interact with what's in your pants, there are definitely body parts that feel really different to me. And I've talked about that on here, that that was actually one of my to understand myself. That was something I had to go through, was that I could love and be attracted to people with different body parts. But when it came to actually having sex, there was something that really didn't feel right. And that is whoever is going to be with me, they deserve the feeling of feeling right with their person too. And I'm sure that came through in intimate situations with them. And I want more for those people that had penises that I was interacting with too. They deserve somebody that's like, I'm all about your penis, not someone that's like, oh, it's a penis. So I want to just make that clear. I know. Sometimes I overshare on here. Okay, let's go back to you. So pansexual, do you mind sharing a little bit about how you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm fine with either bisexual or pansexual, because like Maggie said, which is why I smiled, because I feel like there's some things that I've been saying over and over in the office, and like back in the old days, people would be like, bisexual people are blah, blah, blah. And like, it's not the same. But like now I'm like, oh my gosh, you heard me. Because yeah, I think, overarching bisexual and pansexual are pretty similar. I used to say that I use the language of bisexual because I was attracted to more, quote, air quotes, masculine men and feminine women, as in I'm very into people who kind of present along those binaries, since I myself am a little more in between. And that's
fascinating.
Somewhat true.
Yes.
But the more I learned about gender and unpacked things, I realized I'm more maybe attracted to like full figured or curvy folks who were assigned female at birth, and maybe more muscular folks who were assigned male at birth and who sort of present that way. But there's so many people who fit those descriptions who are non-binary. And so it didn't feel genuine anymore to say that I wasn't attracted to non-binary people. And I think that me saying that for a while was probably a self-acceptance thing of not feeling like I was attractive. So I think through unpacking all of that, the easiest way is to say, I'm fine. I like queer the best, I think, but I'm fine with pansexual. I'm fine with bisexual. Queer, I think, just fits me the most because it can also encompass being non-binary. It can also encompass being kinky. It can kind of encompass the whole spectrum of non-traditional sexual identity
too, because as you evolve, like things change and you learn more about yourself, or you try something new or something else surprises you. So I think the way our identities evolve a lot, queer is just like a really great umbrella term that we're all queer.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I think queer, I've even been unpacking the word gay for myself, because gay it's still me, but queer is probably the best, because we were laughing last week about I'm more of like a straight man.
Yes, you are.
Yes. So there's that.
But here's my question for the word queer for you guys. How do you feel if somebody outside of the community refers to you as queer? Does that feel good? Or are you like, no, you got to be in community to use that word?
No, I feel good about it.
You do?
I mean, for me, I definitely think it would depend on the context. I know there are still some folks out there who generally are older who have had it used against them as a slur, and even younger, like even some of the people in our office. And so I obviously think if I did unfortunately hear someone using it that way, yeah, not cool, should not be used as an insult. But what I like is that I feel like people who are allies, like my husband, who started out just being an ally and now is like, I'm queer, it made him more comfortable because he is mostly straight on the spectrum when it comes to attraction to women, but he, is inclusive that trans women are women. He has acknowledged in himself that everyone's a little bit gay. He is in a relationship with two women instead of just, I slept with two women once. That makes you queer. You're in a queer relationship. So I think I've seen people who think they're allies kind of taking it on, and then it kind of allows them to be fully using that label. So I'm here for everyone to use it as long as it's not used as an insult.
Yeah, I don't love when people outside the community refer to me as queer. I still have, and I think it's just my own trauma and like just things that were said about me and the way, and sometimes, and this is the thing about being, because I'm very straight passing, a lot of people don't recognize that I'm queer, which also pisses me off. And I say to Alex, I'm like, whenever we're someplace together, I'm like, yes, people are going to know I'm queer because I'm with you and I'm holding your hand and we're like kissing or sitting close. Because a lot of the times when I walk through the world, people don't like clock me as queer. And the bad side of that is people say some really fucked up shit to me. And that's where that word for me, I think I don't like when people outside the community call it, because I have like such negative shit that I hear people say, because they're like, oh, I can say it to her. She's obviously a straight woman. So I have a couple people that I do really feel are allies, and they refer to me as queer. This is my friend, Andrea. I'm like, it feels really good when she says it, but it's like, if I don't know you, no, I have too much. I think I have too much trauma and pain from how that word has been used in the past. But this is a good thing for allies. Ask before you use it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. You right? Oh, go ahead.
Alex and I are sharing a microphone today. That's why we're so smooth and slick in our question asking. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm just going to do a rocky little transition into, so we talked about the magazine. Are you willing to talk more about personal relationships and speaking of sexuality, like where you are with your life in that?
Absolutely.
You want to go first?
Sure.
All right,
Fire
Addison,
away.
give it to us. So you mentioned you're married to a man.
Yes.
Okay. So how long have you been married? And because you also, you told us you identify as bisexual, pansexual. So I want to know, how does this work in a marriage with a man?
Yes. So I have been married for over 9 years now. It will be 10 years next April.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we've been together off and on for 15 years, 16. I'm only 32. So you can do the math. That's almost half of my life. So, we've kind of been together through it all, through the thick and the thin. And I think always when we were together in high school and college, I was actually just telling Maggie about this. We really were always poly. We were always polyamorous, but we didn't have the language around it. So it showed up in a way where we sometimes ended up hurting each other, not communicating well, not fully acknowledging that.
Can you give me your words around what polyamorous means?
Yes. So to me, polyamorous, it can definitely be a spectrum, but the ability to love, have romantic feelings for, have sexual feelings for more than one person at the same time, in a way that involves open communication and everyone knowing what's going on. So I think my husband and I, for a long time, were struggling to kind of figure out how that would show up in our lives. Like we were like, we're together, but we're not exclusive, but we're talking to these other people. Now we're not together. Now we are. Now we're not. Now we are. And really, we kind of always were, but we're just dating other people. And that's very normalized in 2020. That wasn't very normalized in 2010. It was just like, y'all are a mess. So that was how we were seen for a minute. And then as I came to terms with my identity and the fact that, you know, I like women, and we both kind of came to terms with maybe we're not always monogamous people. And that doesn't mean that we don't love each other or, you know, respect each other in the way that people in a good relationship should. Then we were able to sort of build off of that and start exploring being poly and dating other people. And then that's actually when I met my girlfriend. And then she actually ended up coming just to hang out with me and also really hitting it off with my husband. And we all ended up dating, and we've now all been dating for 7 years.
Is it just the three of you now, or do you have relationships outside of the three of you?
It's just the three of us now. Thank goodness, because I don't have time for anything else.
That was one of my questions. Gosh, that's quite a time commitment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But 7 years, the three of you have been together. You and your husband have been married for 10.
Yes.
And so you said a key word to me though about polyamory, and that's everything is open and honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm imagining that has to be a key to the success of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at this point where we are, since we're all just together, it doesn't really, you know, it kind of feels like we have that side of the communication figured out. But certainly when we were both dating, and then additionally for a while, we did open up our relationship. So when the three of us were separately dating, which also was just too much of a time commitment with how much time I spend on work. But for that takes, you know, a huge amount of communication and openness and honesty.
So for people that are listening and they're like, wow, this is the first time I've ever heard the story of someone who is polyamorous. What are myths that are out there that you're like, oh, I want to debunk this, or like, this is something I wish people knew, or how to, because I don't think it's that uncommon for people to be in polyamorous relationships, but I think we don't have an opportunity to hear about it without a heavy dose of judgment coming from assholes.
Yeah.
So what would you want to debunk, or what is something you're like, I wish people knew that this is what it really is like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this because we just ran an interview that was kind of on the same lines. And one of the things they said in the interview, it's about a new polyamorous show, is they showed it to one of their friends, and their friend said, oh, this is going to be juicy. This is a couple at the beginning of the end. Because it was a couple that was about to open their relationship. And the person was like, no, you completely missed the point. This is this really wonderful story about this couple's love. And so I think to me, that's the biggest thing. Like, I am a pretty open person. So if you're just going to think that I'm, you know, promiscuous, want to sleep with a bunch of people, okay, whatever. I guess as a queer person, I'm kind of used to that judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But what hurts me is when it's like, oh, okay, so this is a sign that your relationship is failing. Because I mean, I definitely think there are folks out there who are at such a bad place in their relationship. They think what will fix it is to open things up. But for the most part, I think, you know, it should only be really done if you're in a healthy relationship, and if the communication is already there and the foundation is already there, and it should be seen as like this celebration, like, okay, we're taking things to the next level. It should be seen the way, you know, getting a pet or having a kid, not to call the third person a pet, but you know what I mean?
Right. Like if this would be
seen as a positive milestone, not our relationship is on the brink and this is, you know, a last ditch effort to save it.
Thank you for saying that. And I agree with you're saying, like the thing about the pet and the baby, where people are like, well, this will fix us.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you ever want to put yourself in a hotbed of a situation, get a fucking pet or have a baby? Like,
yep.
It is hard freaking work. Why would you do that? Well, thank you for sharing that. What else do you like tell, or when you were saying like in the beginning too, that you guys were, your word was you guys were messy, but honestly, I don't know anybody who wasn't messy at that time of life.
In college, yeah.
And I worry about people that weren't messy.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, messy's coming for you. Or you're just not living.
Yeah.
Right. So how did you start to how did you go from we're messy to having the language of polyamory?
A lot of communication, just around, our feelings and checking in and realizing that jealousy is still going to happen and it's still going to be real. And we need to treat each other and things like that come up in a really respectful way. In college, it's like, this is overarching, but no one is communicating. People are overly intoxicated. They're just hooking up. They're just, kind of running around. And like you said, I think it's pretty common to be messy, even if your story is, oh, I was single, but, I was, just sleeping with people, not because it made me feel affirmed, but because I was in a dark place or whatever. There's always some sort of like messy college story. So to me, I think it was just a little bit of growing up and communicating and talking and lots of long hours of, bad conversations, crying, lots of hours of good conversations and excitement and planning and, fantasizing and just the whole spectrum of just kind of like, okay, what do we want this to look like? How do we want people to show up in our lives? How do we want to show up for each other? What's going to change? What are our boundaries? What do we share? What do we not share? All the conversations you can think of, essentially.
My mind is like,
I know. I don't mean to be quiet. I'm just so in awe, and thank you for just sharing all of that. It's I'm learning.
Yeah, I'm really grateful at your openness, because I think that perception of promiscuity or saving a marriage or all of these, I think that is what I see people talking about when it comes to polyamory. And what I'm gaining from you is hearing the level of commitment you and your husband must have to each other to say, no, we can do this. Because you've been polyamorous the whole time, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much, definitely. So when we first started kind of talking about and exploring this, we also decided to move across the country, because that's not crazy. But, we started talking about this and we were still living in Richmond, and then we moved to Colorado. So there was definitely a portion of it where we were having these conversations, but we obviously weren't actively dating, because we were like literally getting ready, packing up, selling stuff, then driving, then like living with roommates in just one bedroom together, and like figuring out how to start our lives here and actually kick things off the ground, thinking about school and careers. So, it took a while before we really started dating in Colorado, but I also kind of think that was a good thing timing wise, because it sort of gave us this break where we were just the two of us together figuring this out as we were going through this transition.
My biggest question would be, when you met your girlfriend and you guys have been together 7 years, but like, how do you start to set those boundaries of like, I guess the jealousy, or like, how do you start building that trust? Because for the person that's coming in too, like you and your husband have been married. And so for her, is it like, I wonder what that experience was like for her, because would she feel like, well, I guess if she identifies as polyamorous too, she understands what this feels normal and right for her.
Yeah, I definitely think I can speak for her and say it was difficult for her in the beginning. I 100% know if she was here, she would say that, because we had a lot of conversations around how it is really hard to come into an established relationship. And it is really hard to have three. What it's like to have two-way communication around a relationship in good times and bad. Just imagine adding in another opinion. It's like that. And then if two of you are way more established, there is a lot of, oh, I thought you just kind of knew this about us. Well, I didn't. And now I'm over here feeling awful. And there's a lot of that to work through, especially in the beginning of a relationship like that.
So if we have somebody out there listening that's like, okay, I think maybe I'm polyamorous, but I don't know. What would you want them to hear from you as a person that's like, yeah, I figured this out? What's something like for someone out there that might be like, this is the first time they've heard this, or they're resonating with something you're saying, they're trying to identify for themselves? What would you want them to know?
I think the main thing is just that it's it's a very beautiful thing, and it can be a very wonderful way to kind of explore who you are, but also that it's not easy. I think the other side of the myth is, swingers parties and giant beds and opulence, and everyone's just, it's like an episode of Nip Tuck. It's an orgy, that whole situation. I would also say
That's
not it.
Okay.
Like, if that's if that's the element you're interested in, maybe you and your partner are just interested in being swingers, essentially going maybe to sex parties and never having anything go further than that. If you feel like you can have sort of a genuine love connection with multiple people at the same time, and, it's not just about sex, that's just an element, then yeah, I would definitely say it's rewarding and it's worth exploring.
Yeah, because it is very different. Thank you for spelling that out, because being a couple that swings, very different than polyamory, because you can never say all because you may have polyamorous people that are at swing parties, but those parties are set up just more around physical connection than emotional. Is that right?
Absolutely.
I hate making generalizations, but that's at least my understanding.
No, I definitely think, of course, it's life. Life gets messy. I'm not saying people who set out to be swingers didn't ever realize there was a deeper connection with someone and become poly, or people who were poly weren't like, oh, I'm kind of just in it for the sex. Let's just get into that side of it. But I think for the most part, being poly is about wanting those connections, those relationships, wanting things with someone besides your spouse that isn't just sex. So dating and, going on cute dates and cuddling and all of the other elements of relationships besides sex as well.
It's like multiple layers of intimacy, because we think of intimacy as just being sexual, but it's lots of different types. Okay.
Yes.
Do you have like one person that you're like, if this is going on with you, you're like, I'm going to him or I'm going to her, or you like equally would go to either one of them for something you needed?
Oh, definitely. It depends.
Yeah.
I obviously still know my husband a little better. But then with me and my girlfriend, we kind of have more of a bond in some areas where it's like, okay, I always go to you to talk about this, or I know I can rely on you for this. And just like anything else, kind of learning both of their triggers as well. Like, well, this person has a hard time dealing with this. So if we have to, like, my husband does not like big, loud crowds of people. So I go shopping with my girlfriend, but my girlfriend can't go to shows, and my husband and I are in a band together. So there's just a lot of like learning these little intricacies of like what stresses people out, what makes people happy, and kind of walking those boundaries as well.
Can I ask you about I guess a label kind of question? So you said, so you have your husband and then girlfriend, like, and have you ever talked about I don't even know what question I'm asking. Kind of like, would girlfriend ever change to wife, even though, like, how does that?
Yeah. We've definitely talked about that. And we're actually, so my husband and I are having our big 10-year, we didn't ever have a wedding. We just went down to the courthouse. We were very poor and like just had moved here, and we're like, let's do this. So our plan is to have a big 10-year celebration this coming April, to kind of, invite friends, invite family, be like, okay, this is it. Like, we're having a wedding, whatever you want to call it, a party. Mm-hmm. And so part of us has been like, should we make this a celebration for all three? And then there's the conversation of like, only my family is liberal. Both of their families are not. So like what that looks like. And I think
surprise,
that's probably a big hurdle. And of course, the other hurdle is like, of course, society. I would love, the idea of having some sort of ceremony and then sort of changing how we refer to each other. But I feel like even as society advances in other ways, there's no legal three-way marriage. There's nothing like that. There's at this point, like, she can't even be on our insurance because they're like, you're not related. Like, there are actually a lot more hurdles to any kind of relationship like that than you would think.
Do all three of you live together?
We do. Yes.
Okay. So when you want to like get away from everybody, do you have like your own space in the house where you're like, this is my space?
Yes. Actually, the only reason things were very tough between us when we lived in like literally a 1-bedroom, like just a little above a studio kind of situation. We are lucky enough to have a pretty decent sized house, and it almost has its own apartment downstairs. There's just one bathroom and kitchen upstairs. So the downstairs is like, we can go there to play music, and my husband hangs out down there a lot, and having kind of like the 2 levels to our house and all these rooms is super helpful because otherwise we would get stir crazy.
Well, and I think everybody needs space at some point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
What else do you want to know? You're really great about answering all these questions. I'm really grateful that you're open about it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Maggie.
Go ahead.
Oh.
I was going to say, Maggie, we're going to turn the hot seat
You
over
ready?
to you.
Yes.
Sure.
So Maggie, I know you mentioned you are married to a man.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to walk us through, are you willing to walk us through the details as well?
Sure.
Okay. And I know how much I really would love to hear more about how you decided to walk away from religion or from your religion at the time. So yeah, tell me everything you're willing to tell me.
Okay. Gosh. So I'll start in the middle. So my husband that I'm married to now, he and I dated in junior high and high school. So my 7th grade year, and then my junior year for just a little bit, and he had already graduated. So we already knew each other in the past, and he found me on Facebook about 13 years ago. And we started out as friends, and just over time and talking, and he got out of his relationship. I got out of my relationship, and we started talking, well, could we long distance date? Because I was in Kansas City at the time and he was in Colorado. And so we tried it, and, thanks to Skype and lots of phone calls, we made it. We went on a road trip together, which told me how compatible we were. And so, we fell in love all over again, and in a different adult way. And I had worked through quite a bit of relationship therapy by then, but not all of it. So, we had some serious insecurities that I had to work through, and he's been supportive through all of that. I tried to move out here, and that didn't work. So he moved out there for a little while, and that's where we got married, also in front of a judge, with the intention to have a reception back in Colorado, but that never happened, or a honeymoon. But then finally, when after my mom passed away and I was able to sell her trailer house, I finally had the money to move back out here. So we did that. And we've been through it, but he's been through it as I've come to know myself and find out how queer I am and all of that. And that has been very challenging. We were having quite a bit of problems when we grew apart. He was very distracted with his stuff, and I just took that and went inside myself. I think kind of an abandonment response. And so I was very much involved with my friends, with my work, with the events, with all the queer stuff, and not sharing with him. And so
when you say like all the queer stuff, meaning you're on this journey right now of like, suddenly you're like, oh, there's a reason I've always been around queer people.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're unpacking this, but you weren't sharing it with him.
Right.
Okay.
And also just having a lot of trauma responses from past relationships. So there was a huge package there that was culminating into literally a marriage ending. And I started going to therapy with that in mind. Like, I really want to separate. I don't know if I really want to get a divorce again, like third time, like divorce is horrible. And this is where I'm at and this is where he's at. We did a little bit of couples counseling, but we had a really bad couples counselor. So it helped him, but not me. And then by continuing with that and also continuing to unpack all of my relationship trauma on top of my queerness, we were able to come back together and start to really talk about these deep issues. I think I actually came out to him as pansexual when we had been drinking too much on one of our queer retreats that we used to take at Outfront.
Well, a queer retreat at Outfront, not a queer retreat with you and your husband.
Right.
Okay.
But he was with us.
He was with you on the queer retreat. Okay.
So, and I had too much to drink and I started going on and on to everybody about what pansexuality means and why I felt that way. People were like, okay, great. Calm it down. Thanks. And so he had to kind of unpack that. And then, when you're relatively a straight person, even though you accept the community, you don't know a lot about the community. There was a lot of education to go on there.
What was something like he didn't know?
Really all of it. Okay. So I love that your podcast has brought out that your sexual orientation doesn't depend on who you've been with. It's who you're attracted to. Because I get so many straight people that think, oh, well, if you haven't slept with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of them.
You can be queer as fuck and never have had sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The things that we do don't determine our queerness. It's who we are on the inside that determines it, not who you do things with and what party parts you do them with. No, people don't get that shit. Okay, keep going.
I had to really work with him to help him understand drag queens and then trans people and the difference. And there was a time when he really wasn't even comfortable around drag queens because he just didn't understand it. And then over time, he has become the biggest, fiercest ally. I mean, he will fight a person. He will be as flamboyant as he can be to make his point. He loves the community now and he understands so much more about it. But I mean, truthfully, I didn't understand hardly anything about it. I thought I knew some stuff, but when I started at Outfront and over the years, I've learned so much and there's always so much more to learn. Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of one of the things is that I got pregnant when I was 17 and probably right at the time when I was just starting to maybe recognize something about myself. And now I've got to decide if I'm going to keep this baby. Mm-hmm. And then I make the mistake of marrying the father. Mm-hmm. And then I went through a very traumatic year and a half, almost 2 years, married to him, and he moved me out to Kansas where I knew nobody, and he was a narcissist.
Oh, they love to isolate, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
So pregnant, 17,
Maggie.
Living with a narcissist, no phone, couldn't afford a phone, only one car, which he had most of the time. It was bad. It was real bad, and so bad that his dad and stepmom helped me get out of the marriage. And by then I had 2 of his kids because I was a very fertile person and birth control didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Just so you know, always use 2 forms. And even then it's not foolproof. But anyway, and my sister's the same way. So I actually divorced him started divorce proceedings while I was pregnant with the second child. Mm-hmm. And so then I found myself in a teeny tiny town called Nucla, Colorado, where my sister lived. A single mother, divorced at 19.
With 2 kids.
2 little babies. They were 18 months apart. And finally moved into my house. The ex tried to get back with me for a little while. Back then, there's like no information about narcissism and victims of narcissism. So Alex knows this. I know Alex posts a lot about narcissism.
I would have benefited from understanding it very much. I mean, anyway, back to you.
Me too. Yes. And I did have a therapist because I started having panic attacks and didn't even know what that was. I thought I was losing my mind. And he did help me with the panic attack part. The doctor did say this is a trauma response. Let's go to the therapist. I only saw the therapist once. I was very poor. And so I dealt with that, but didn't really deal with it very well. And when I moved to Montrose, and by then I had some friends and I had unpacked some of this stuff, but I was at that point like, okay, I am so through with men. I'm going to be a lesbian. And I think my friends thought that I was just saying that to be funny, but I really was looking for someone. And I wasn't, but you don't get out much when you're a single parent. So really it was when I went to the bar a couple times, or I was at the grocery store, but there was no one to be found. And I didn't even know where to start, didn't know who to talk, didn't have anyone to talk to. And so finally, after about a year or a little more, I decided, okay, fine, I'm just going to date again. And so I started dating men again. And then I had turned to religion to kind of try and help with all these things. And that was a big mistake because some of them were really crazy.
Were you raised with religion?
No, not really. My mother was raised Lutheran and really loved her church, but we never really found one that she liked while I was growing up. So I went to churches with friends sometimes, but I didn't. And that was also not a good experience. I went to a Catholic church once, and I went to the Bible school, and they were pounding nails in this board and saying that every time you sin, this is a nail in the board. And they literally used the example of alcohol. Well, my friends who took me knew that I had tried my parents' beer before. So all of a sudden I am got those nails, and
those Catholics
harassing me about it.
Catholics, man, they are no freaking joke. No matter what, they are scary. Okay. Yes, I'm having flashbacks. We didn't have the nail in the wood, but I did have, there was a lot of things that were said to me that I'm like, I don't understand this. I did have a nun one time. My sister will remember this if she listens. Her name was Sister Irene. That woman was scary. And I remember one time I wasn't paying attention and she whipped me out of the desk. And I was a second grader. And I was whipped out of the desk in front of the whole class. And I was like, holy shit. But yeah, anyway, I get the nail. They love to make you feel guilt and shame, guilt and shame, guilt and shame. Stay in line. Yeah.
That's how they can control you.
Yes.
So the Assembly of God Church very much believes in the gifts of the Spirit, which are like talking in tongues and interpreting what that is, and healing and all kinds of things. So I think I went to a sermon about Jesus's sacrifice and what that meant, and that touched me. And so I accepted him and became born again and all that stuff. And that was all kind of great and helpful. But then when I would have panic attacks or something like that, they would act like that was some demons or spiritual forces trying to fight me because I'm trying to be good. And well, that's not going to help my anxiety. Thank you.
That I'm fighting a demon?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Thank you so much. I'll take another Xanax. So
Like, let's abuse you with more abuse.
exactly. And so when I started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, it was actually appealing to me because it was less emotional and more logical. Now we're looking at the scriptures and we're looking at, what this means and some of the backstory, and they know history about this and da, 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 da. So I'm very book smart. So I like that kind of stuff. And even when I was at the Assembly of God Church and I went to a Revelation class, like I was super fascinated by the prophecies and how the different scriptures like connect to each other, and like all that stuff was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And so the witnesses did that too, and even more so of a deep dive. So I'm totally sure that's what appealed to me about them. And then they also seemed very accepting, and they are until you become one. And so, and so I was baptized in as a witness in Kansas City. So we had just moved there, but I had been recommended for baptism by the people that I had been going to services with and all of that. And so I spent 15 to 20 years in that religion, still kind of like explaining away certain things, like you can't judge anyone because we're literally all sinners. Mm-hmm. So, which I totally believed. And at the same time, like I said before, when someone asked me, what if your son came out gay? Wouldn't they disfellowship him? And I'm like, once he's baptized, yes. And then I'm like, oh.
So that feels like judgment.
Yes, very much so.
So I'm sure that this then becomes like, for you, somebody very logical, as you're saying, and you're following all these teachings, and you're like, because I remember doing the book of Revelations too. And there's some type of like, I don't know if you're a person that likes answers, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I understand this. But now you're giving a healthy dose of hypocrisy here. We don't judge unless you do this, which is queerness. And then we judge the fuck out of you and kick you out.
Well, it's the act. So you could be gay, you just can't act on it.
Because that's not fun. That's not fun at all.
But also you have to it's once you become one of them that you have to adhere to Jehovah's rules and standards, or you become a cancer to the congregation and now you're out.
A cancer to the congregation.
Yeah.
That's a heavy statement.
Sorry, I need my water.
Yeah, take your water. So again, you could say, I'm queer, but if you acted on it, that's the line that it crosses.
Yeah. Any kind of sexual immorality. So that would include sex outside of marriage.
Does it include sex if not for the purposes of procreation?
No.
Oh, no. So you can have all the straight sex that you want.
In fact, you're supposed to, whether you want to or not.
So, oh, wow. So this is fascinating to me, because in Catholics, they're usually like, no sex is for the purposes of procreation. Mm-hmm. But this is no, have all the sex. You're supposed to have all the sex, but only if it's this kind of sex. Mm-hmm. If it's anything outside of that, whatever they determine to be.
So the husband and the wife, to be very specific, yes, are allowed to and are supposed to have sex, but also the woman's supposed to be submissive to the man. And so they're not even supposed to turn him down unless you're sick or there's extenuating circumstances. They go that deep.
So if I said, honey, I'm so literal, I'm sorry. So if I'm like, honey, I have a headache tonight, doesn't cut it. I'm supposed to be submissive and have sex.
I think if a headache would suffice, but you can't lie about it. So,
oh shit, I'm screwed. Literally.
Right. So, unpacking that. So here's part of what's bothering me about the religion, but also keeping me suppressing who I am. And I was telling Addison, for the longest time in my life, I truly believed that the porn that my husbands had watched started to turn me gay because when I would watch them, I remember watching it with my first husband, like as an example, and really being a lot more interested in the woman. And later on, because of some of these religious beliefs that came through me, I thought that porn was so evil and sexualized women so much that it was turning me gay. And I was in complete denial that I actually was way more attracted to the woman than the man in a lot of those scenarios. And so that was one of the things I had to unpack in therapy. That was one of the things I had to unpack when I started Outfront. Like, oh yeah, I did used to think that. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? So when I would, I'll just give a specific example. So my second marriage, I've got the 2 kids. I've adopted his daughter. Still a Jehovah's Witness, but starting to come out of that. Marriage is terrible. And I met a woman at work that I was really attracted to. And she was also in a situation, I think a relationship or whatever. So we never talked about it, but we definitely like flirted and like tried to find ways that we could run into each other or hang out together. And I remember feeling like I can't do anything with this because I'm married. And I never had the courage to say anything to her about it. And she never said anything about it to me. But there are little instances like that happen throughout my lifetime that really should have been a clue. But then the other thing that I had to unpack was I had men who cheated on me, and I had women, even from junior high on, girls who had betrayed me in one way or another and tried to sleep with my boyfriends behind my back, sleep with my husbands behind my back. And so I had a lot of distrust towards women. And that was another reason why I was having a hard time accepting that about myself. And so those are some other things that I unpacked. And then I have to talk to my husband now about all of this stuff that I'm unpacking. And I got disfellowshipped when I was separated from my second husband.
What does disfellowshipped mean?
It means the congregation will have absolutely nothing to do with me.
They always talk to me. It's like a shunning.
Yes.
Okay.
And yet I'm still expected to go to the congregation meetings and sing the songs and not talk to anybody or be talked to.
Would they even look at you?
Sometimes.
And that's so traumatic.
There are a few people that would talk to me anyway, even though that's not the rule.
Oh, that's like narcissism, like the stonewalling.
It's really bad. Yeah. And it was really rough. I went through that. I went through divorce and bankruptcy. My kids were teenagers. My daughter went to live with her father, which I knew was going to be a disaster, and it was. And yeah, so I went through a huge turmoil through that before I even started talking to Dana. My mother died. My father died like years before that. So she was my last parent. She was an alcoholic. So there's a whole lot of relationship trauma there. And so I've gone through a lot of counseling and therapy through my life, but probably the most intense over the last several years since I've been at Outfront. But like it all started with that decision to be authentic and to get to know myself. And it's been intense and it's been hard, but it's been so worth it. And For a long time, my oldest son wouldn't talk to me because he became a witness again. Like he was disfellowshipped for a while by choice. And then he came back to the congregation, which was okay. Like you do you, but then wouldn't have much to do with me after I moved here and started at the Queer magazine. We haven't talked about that yet, but I think a lot of it was also his wife is a narcissist. So there was some stuff going on there too with the isolation and not not having anything to do with me. So it's there's a lot there, but bottom line, when I finally figured out, hey, I have been attracted to all these different types of people throughout different periods of my life. And that's basically my pansexuality. And then understanding more and more about non-binary spaces. And I'm very thankful that my dad was never one to gender conform. He always made sure I had girl toys and boy toys and didn't care that I liked wearing boy clothes and girl clothes, and taught me that I could be anything I wanted to be, any career I wanted. And so like all of these things have come to fruition, but just in the last several years, and it's a lot, but I love the community so much and I love myself so much now and understand and accept so much that I never understood or accepted for the first 4 years of my life. And it's just an incredible journey.
You're a thriver.
Yes, you are. You're a badass thriver.
Thank you.
I feel what you're saying so deeply that I think where I just really resonate with your story is I felt so conditioned for so long that I couldn't even find myself.
Mm-hmm.
And people that are able to do that, right? To say, I got all this, for lack of a better word, shit.
Mm-hmm.
To buck everybody's expectations of you and to say, only this matters. Only what matters in here, who I am. And the beauty that comes after that. Like somebody was saying to me the other day, they're like, you're so brave. And I'm like, am I brave or do I just not need you to validate me? I think it's that I just don't need your validation. I validated myself. So any of this shit out here, it doesn't really matter to me because that feeling that I think you have too, nobody can take that from you.
Right. Yeah. If you don't love me for who I am, then you don't love me.
And I'm all right with that.
Yep. But that can be hard when it's a family member, especially a close one. It was really hard for me to deal with the rejection of my son, who incidentally walked into my life recently and is like really trying to rebuild that relationship. So I'm really happy about that. Kind of cautious, but very happy. But like there were years where he didn't have much to do with me. I found out that he got married on social media.
Oh, Maggie, I'm sorry.
That was rough. That was really rough. And he's my firstborn. So.
Well, and they're always your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just, it's a pain that you have to learn to live with, but it also helped me understand a little bit more. There are a lot of trans people whose kids have rejected them once they transitioned or decided to. And I've known a couple of them and I really am like, oh God, yeah, I know it hurts. And I'm very thankful that the two that I know, their kids have finally come around and that's good. And I'm glad that mine seems to have like come around too. But yeah, I've got 2 grandkids that I haven't met yet. So I'm really anxious and hopeful that that'll happen soon.
So tell us where is marriage now? Where are you guys today?
So today, Dana is aware that I would really like to explore at least a sexual relationship with a woman. It could be, and it might not just be a woman, but right now that's the only thing that he's comfortable with. And he understands that means he would not be part of that experience. But it's something that I had wanted to happen more than a few times in my life, and it didn't. And so he understands that that is something that I would like to explore. And so but I think there's also still a little bit of a fear there. As much as I love him, I think there's a fear there that I could fall in love with someone else and maybe decide to leave. And I understand that. And I can't completely guarantee that that couldn't happen. But at the same time, like, I do love him a lot, and we've been through a lot. And I think that the people that show up for me and that are there for me and that really love me for who I am, and especially all of the changes and stuff that I've been through, to have him stand by me through all of that, like, that really counts in my heart and soul. So it would take a lot to take me away from that. Now, there was a time when I was like really fed up with everything. But now that I've worked through my part in our failing marriage, and he's worked through his part, and we've come together, and I actually communicate now instead of stuffing everything down. I feel like it would take a lot to take me away from him, but I definitely also know that there's this side to me that has not explored anything other than a relationship or a sexual relationship with a man. And I have to see what that is. I have to
walk up to the door and knock on it.
Yeah. I don't know how that's going to happen. I just am open to the universe helping me figure that out. I mean, look at everything that's happened since I opened myself to the universe in the first place. So, yeah.
I thank you for sharing all that. I guess my one question just on that last part is, understanding how people, like I was saying before, like for me, like a lot of attraction is not necessarily body parts, but it's between ears. Like I'm not, and there's no, please understand, there's no judgment in this at all, because I am very much like, you do you. Just don't expect me to do what feels right for you. Right.
Right.
Casual sex is not something that ever felt right for me. And I think it's probably because of the thing between the ears, right? I have to have that to feel attraction. Do you feel like you could potentially just have a sexual relationship, and just for it to be that experience that you could have and then leave there and then continue to have the emotional intimacy and physical intimacy with your husband?
I have had a casual sexual relationship in the past. I'm definitely more on the demisexual side, meaning that I have to have a connection with a person to feel sexual attraction. But that connection can be a friendship and just caring about each other. So yes, I could have that.
I really hope you figure it out.
Me too.
I hope you guys figure it out, because I feel really is the work that you and your husband have put in, and how much love there is there. And I am, love is love, and love conquers everything to me. So I really hope that it works out the way for you as the universe opens that it's supposed to.
Yeah. Me too.
What you got, babe?
I'm just swimming and everything. Yeah, it was wonderful to hear your stories.
Thank you.
Anything that you would want someone listening to your story, maybe somebody who's been either in a narcissistic relationship, needing to step away from a religious institution, on a path of discovery that you went on, is there anything you would want a listener out there that might be experiencing one of those things to know?
The best thing you can do, and this is true really for any situation in your life, but especially true if you've had that kind of abuse and control in your life, is to really learn to love yourself. And I know it's not an easy journey. I know it takes practice, and it can feel really wrong at times, but the more you work on that and really loving and accepting yourself, just like you would your best friend, or your most intimate lover, that kind of self-love will get you, like, it'll produce so much healing that I can't even describe it. I can't even explain it. It's just such a big healing to do that for yourself.
I couldn't agree more. I have to give you guys the most sincere thank you, because we've talked about this on this podcast, that when you are talking into a microphone and you don't know where that story is going to go, it is a huge lesson in vulnerability, because you're just opening your heart and your experiences in your world. But it's so healing to people on the other side. So thank you. And, you know, I talk about the vulnerability bubble all the time. Like tomorrow, it's going to be running through my head that I talked about penises on here. It is. I just know it is. But I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to just listen and learn and share. And I know that this podcast goes to people and they find it healing because they hear their story and they don't feel so alone. It's the podcast I wish I had when I was a kid, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I emailed you guys, because I started listening and it felt so good to hear from two other people who came out late in life, who have kids. And there's so much that you guys share so vulnerably. And one of my daily affirmations is I'm strong enough to be vulnerable. So I really feel like it's easy to open up to you because you guys have opened up so much. I'm sorry. I hope you don't hate the term "you guys."
No, I'm totally
generally.
But what popped in my head when you said that is that's something I've learned from Alex. I did not like, oh my God, I was a nightmare. I was a shove everything down, right? I definitely saw vulnerability as a weakness. I had it really messed up in my head, really twisted up in my head.
Me too.
And, you know, I met Alex 6 years ago. And we were friends for a while. But one of the things I loved about Alex, and still do, is that I will logistic myself out of anything. I will be like, no, we're going to go from A to B to C and we don't have to feel anything. We don't have to feel anything. We just keep going. And Alex will look at me and be like, how do you feel? Tell me what the feeling is. And for a long time, like I was so concerned with keeping myself inside because I thought that was safer. And then you meet someone and I'm like, I've lost all ability to do that is really what happened to me. And then Alex very graciously has held my hand through it because I didn't know how. That's you. Your feelings badass.
Yeah. Well, part of my journey has been to relearn how to feel. And I remember when I put myself back in therapy, like 5 years ago, whatever, it doesn't matter. When the therapist was like, how do you feel? I'm like, I don't know. Like fine, I think. But we worked through it and it was like, the flag was, I couldn't name, and I knew I felt a lot. And that part I wasn't denying, but I think also being in a narcissistically abusive relationship where they weaponize your feelings against you, I would have a feeling and then share it, and then it would just be twisted. And so then actually you end up eating your own words and being like, well, maybe I don't feel that way. Well, maybe I'm not who I say I am. And so it's taken a lot of work to like I do actually have a lot of words. They get, you know, in the healing process, the loosening of the concrete. That anyway, so that was, I don't know if that was a tangent or not, but that I felt like I've always been full of this like electric colors and swirls and feelings. And I there's so much freedom in being able to name it.
I think there's power in it.
Yeah. And I'm messy as fuck. We talk about that all the time, but being able to, you know, and being able to just say, how do I feel right now? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Powerful.
I love messy as fuck people though. Like that to me is you're living. If you're messy as fuck, you are probably living on it's the people that are what did you say? The Stepford Wives?
Mhm.
That drives me insane. And I think probably because I was one for a while. And now I've loved like this awful, I'm like, no, not that. Yeah. Well, do me one thing before we wrap this. How can people get your magazine?
We have on our website, outfrontmagazine.com, you can read it digitally or you can pick it up at distribution points. And there is on the menu a distribution. So you can look up where, your zip code and search what places are closest to you. And then if there's not a place close enough to you, or you don't feel like trying to go to those places, you can subscribe to our magazine to have it sent to your door. And it's $39.97, I think, a year. And that
We need to subscribe to that.
That covers the postage and the poly bagging so that it ends up really nice in your mailbox.
Well, and I remember you telling me, Addison, that part of one of your decisions was to make it the thicker paper, and it's twice a month,
Once a month.
once a month,
monthly.
But it's a beautiful magazine.
Thank you.
I'm so glad y'all came in. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask our listeners too, if you have burning questions, because I wasn't invasive enough to ask all of them, and you might have more, you can email us at howtobequeerpodcast. And we will, if it's okay with you guys, we'll either send the questions or we'll welcome you back to answer more. Okay. So thank you both very much. And remember, it's howtobequeerpodcast@gmail.com. Oh my God, I actually knew one of our things. Okay. You tell them the rest of the stuff, because I don't remember any of that stuff. Okay.
Well, I was just saying, I pick up my copy at Metamorphosis Fitness.
Yes.
That's where I get mine. So go check us out on Balls of Magic. We're expanding a little bit, and I'll have a list of things to share on the next episode, but you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. You all have Instagram and Facebooks. So go check out Outfront Magazine on Instagram and Facebook as well. Youth Scene, Instagram, Facebook.
Did you have other housekeeping stuff to tell people, or am I making that up?
Well, no, you're not making it up. I think I just, speaking of messy as fuck, I think I just need to write a list, because there are a lot of cool things. We have merch coming, merchandise. There's lots of cool stuff coming. So yes, I just need to write it down, and we'll have details soon.
And I love our logo, so I'm so happy you're putting it on things. Thanks, Andrea. Okay, that's it for us this week. We'll be back soon. Actually, Alex and I are going on vacation. We won't be back soon. See you soon. Well, in like 2 weeks. I don't know.
Love you, bye. No.
Love you, bye. We're super highly produced. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye.